Now, in the beginning of the day, I mentioned to you how the world is sort of grappling with the phenomena of the great resignation. What do we mean by that? As the world came to a close and the hybrid work model became our reality, a number of people have realized that they would like to check out of the disease of busyness, how our days and minutes are filled, but we are not as productive. So now going back, a lot of firms are debating whether they'd like to present their people with the right kind of environment. And both sides of the argument, both sides of the debate are pretty heavyweight. There's some CEOs who believe there can't be no team building, there cannot be any camaraderie, and the teamwork doesn't just come together in case you don't see people. But definitely, working from home, this hybrid model is our reality. So how do we pave the way forward? We have a fantastic panel just to address that. Ladies and gentlemen, in our fifth and final session of day one of the fifth edition of the Future Summit, we are going to close the day with this discussion themed as Reimagining Leadership, Productivity and the Workplace. Just about a decade ago, we started talking about an open plan. No longer did we have offices and closed cabins. We wanted to work together. We wanted to work in an open plan. But now, ladies and gentlemen, the next session, the final session for day one, will be moderated by the CEO and the Managing Director of Pakistan Stock Exchange. Please welcome Mr. Farrukh Khan. With all due respect, ladies and gentlemen, there's a parallel session happening right behind the head table. Next up, the Managing Director and CEO of Siemens Pakistan, please welcome Mr. Markus Erich. Please also put your hands together to welcome the CEO of InfraZamin Pakistan, Ms. Maheen Rahman. I also see a very familiar face on the panel, and he is someone who I accredit for sort of roping me into the arena of corporate hosting and moderating. I believe it was 20 years of TCS when we had a number and series of programs that were happening, and it was, by the way, my first paycheck as well. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome the founder and chairman of the TCS group of companies, Mr. Khalid Awan. May I also take this opportunity to invite our next panelist. He is also part of the hosting organizing team for the fifth edition of the Future Summit. We're very proud of our partners, the Martin Dow Group. Please put your hands together to welcome the Group Managing Director and CEO of Martin Dow Group, Mr. Javed Ghulam Mohammad. Last but definitely not the least, another very familiar face, the President and the CEO of the Mobilink Microfinance Bank. Please welcome Mr. Ghazanfar Azzam. As the workplace changes and our contract, our understanding of what we would want out of our careers. Just 5 years ago, we used to debate about the work-life balance, but now many have concluded that work is a small part of our life in itself. But we'd like it to be passionate, we'd like it to be impactful. So how is this relationship being reimagined? Farrukh Saab, over to you.
Thank you, Sidra. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. And I'm glad to see so many people have lasted the day. We are at the last session of a very, very exciting and interesting day. We have covered a great number of very important subjects for the future of Pakistan, from the economy to climate change, power sector, emerging new digital economy, and now to leadership. Everything that has been discussed so far needs leadership for success. And considering the challenges faced by Pakistan, we really need quite exceptional and adaptive leadership to succeed in the 21st century. And we are fortunate that we have many such leaders in Pakistan, and we've heard from many of them today. It was great to hear the Governor of Sindh emphasizing that the government is looking for top quality talent and really the best minds to come together to help solve the challenges faced by Pakistan. Mr. Ali Akai also mentioned the importance of fostering talent and the human touch, while the Air Chief Marshal Sohail Awan exhorted us not to micromanage but instead focus on our golf swing, which is good advice. And Dr. Shamshad highlighted the challenges of climate change and ESG that all leaders have to now be cognizant of. Many recent reviews and studies have shown that the role of leaders, particularly corporate leaders, has become increasingly difficult in recent years. The challenges that leaders now have to face, successfully master, and navigate have increased and become more complex. Just to name a few, from globalization, accelerating changes in technology and societal norms, dealing with important issues of diversity and ESG, critical need to digitizing your business and the pivot to e-commerce, expectations of young employees, the different skill sets required to lead the new economy companies and startups, and now, as Ghayas also highlighted, how do you lead in a hybrid work environment? All these changes and trends have made the roles and the jobs of CEOs and other corporate leaders extremely complex, and they now require an even greater mastery of multifaceted skill sets than was perhaps required a decade or two ago. And to help us think through and reimagine leadership for the future, we have an outstanding group of panelists with us today. They are all well known, so I will not take up valuable time introducing them. And to start with, I would like to ask all of them to just take a few minutes, maybe between around 3 to 4 minutes, and share their own thoughts on the challenges of leadership in the 21st century. And please share your personal examples and how you have had to change and evolve your leadership styles to succeed. The COVID pandemic has obviously had a big impact, but I would like to focus on longer-term trends and changes that were already in place and will continue, inshallah, the pandemic as well. So to start with, let me start with Javed, the Group Managing Director and CEO of Martin Dow. If you could take a few minutes to share your initial thoughts.
Assalamu alaikum, everybody. I think Martin Dow being a pharmaceutical company, and we are engaged in the health sector. So we all have noticed that there recently, especially the COVID situation, there has been a severe crisis in terms of supply chain. And then we are importing like 80% of our raw material coming from like Europe, India, and China. And there was a lot of disruption there. And at the same time, the cost of doing business has gone high. And pharmaceutical being a regulated industry, we are not allowed to approach directly to the consumer. And we need to go to the doctors, the medical community, who is going to prescribe the products, and the consumers then buy from the pharmacy. So from a marketing point of view, we have to rely on the personal selling. So we have a big workforce in the Martin Dow Group, which is around 2,000 people who are working in the field and visiting doctors and hospitals. And especially during the COVID situation, they were more vulnerable, and then we had to take care of that situation too. So there were a lot of challenges related to what technology we should adopt, how we are going to replace this kind of practice, and how we can maintain and sustain the profitability of the organization, considering the cost of input has gone up. From a leadership point of view, one more thing that I would like to highlight here is that Martin Dow, actually in 2010, we acquired a business of Roche, which is a Swiss company. And 2016, we acquired Merck, which is a German company. So that was a big challenge for us as a leader to align the culture of Martin Dow being a local company, and then we have a workforce coming from a Swiss company, and then a workforce coming from a German company. So aligning that culture was a real challenge. So what we have learned and what we have practiced is one thing is very important, which is the basic of any leadership or a management practice, which is the trust and the communication. So let's say if you communicate well, and if your people believe that what you are saying and actually we are practicing that, and if they can witness that, and gradually you can develop that trust factor, once it is developed, then it is very easy and it is very comfortable to sell your vision, you sell the direction, and to adopt the new technology to new system, because they will believe you, they will believe the purpose that you are telling them. So I think this is the important factor, that the trust and communication is the most important factor of the leadership that one should be addressing on a regular basis.
Thank you, Javed sir. Markus, how about you? Please share your experiences, both here in Pakistan as well as what Siemens has been doing globally.
Thank you, Farrukh. First of all, thank you. Pakistan has welcomed me in a very nice way over the last 18 months. I came in the middle of COVID. I got a new team of 600 spread over all Pakistan, having offices in Lahore and Islamabad, Karachi. And how do you meet and mingle with a team that you are not allowed to meet physically? So having everything starting during COVID and online was a challenge, but I have to say and admit it worked brilliantly. We had a wonderful closing of our fiscal year 21, and the amount of work and interaction we all had online and through what we use, MS Teams, is beyond what I ever expected. If you ask me 2 years ago, I was seeing WeWork skyrocketing. I was seeing one office desk being shared by 8 people. I was on this kind of track. And now where are we? We are, Siemens has officially announced to have an average of 2 to 3 days per week where everyone is allowed continuously and even after the pandemic to work from at home. So this is our very simple 2-sentence policy on remote work. We carry on with that. We see no detrimental effect, and it worked seamlessly without glitch. If you look at the international stock value, it is higher than in ever before in 175 years of the company. So overall, we mastered well. And what have we now adopted in terms of change of leadership or in leadership style? We have started with a few very interesting new initiatives. First of all, to be agile, to be fast, to be approachable, are our real objectives. And how can we learn from each other? Maybe later on I will go deeper, but what we adopted is so-called the leadership circles. Leadership circles is something in my 31 years at Siemens I have not seen before. We go over the whole region and we mix the cards. We mix senior leaders, for example, myself, then mid-level leaders with junior leaders. We mix a circle of people who never met physically, maybe even never telephoned before. And there are people in there from Saudi Arabia working in Egypt, or Egyptian working in the UAE, or Omanis and Qataris and Kuwaitis or Germans or whoever. And we are building a group of 12. That's one circle, for example. And every other leader is in another circle. So we have a multiple of circles right now going on over a whole year. And what do? We do what we could have done many years ago, but we never had the idea to do it this way. We are doing a collective sharing and learning. And you know, if I'm not immediately speaking with my boss, but with somebody who sits 1,000 kilometers away, or in your world, it could be that you form circles in the country where someone in Peshawar speaks with someone in Karachi and who is not directly related to him. That's basically what we have created. What do we do in these leadership circles? We have certain themes. I'll come to that later. But it's an environment of trust. I heard it before. Trust is a key element of a new leadership style. So we allow mid-level junior manager somewhere to speak to a senior leader over far distance, something what in the past you would have called a mentorship. But we do a collective mentorship all at once, the whole region, thousands of people, and we all plotted them in. And surprisingly, and I have never expected that this thing works so well, but we came in these circles to very personal experiences. How did you or he or she experience the COVID crisis, or other things, and people start to really break up, you know, to get out and tell what they felt and how hard it was on them, their family, their loans, their children, schooling, and so on. And in this circle of trust, we kind of build up each other because we are in the same company, we're in the same family. It's very relatable, it's very trustable, and it's very supportive to each of the individuals. We also clarify, maybe I stop and hand over to the next, but if we want to come back to this topic, please ask a question, or one of the other members on the panel. That is one part of several others that I might still have a chance to speak to you about. But our approach is a very human leadership style, a very, I heard it before, sapient leadership style when someone spoke about the Harvard Business School, or even you might call it a servant style leadership approach. Where, why am I here? Why am I here? I'm here to dictate, to know it all? Not at all. I'm here to serve. I'm here to help. I'm supporting my team. I'm enabling my team. So this kind of approach is spread out over the whole company, and we are trying to get away from a very hierarchical, I know it all approach. That's about in a nutshell, and let's hand over. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. And I will definitely come back with some follow-up questions. Maheen, please share your thoughts, having been from two industrial companies to a services-focused company.
So InfraZamin is infrastructure finance, and it's a brand new company that was actually born during the COVID pandemic and actually spent the first 3 months of its existence being set up under a work from home situation. So very much a startup kind of culture and environment that we sought to build. And it wasn't until, I think, the first 3 or 4 months into InfraZamin's existence that we actually did have an office space and where all the team could get together in one space. So I think this was a very interesting opportunity for all of us to understand that, yes, new companies can be born under a work from home situation, and they can certainly transition into more mature frameworks once they're ready to do so. So I think that idea in terms of developing hybrid work cultures has certainly thrown out some interesting thoughts from a CEO perspective. First of all your employees don't need to be in the same place, but they do need to be accessible. And developing that team discipline, developing that culture of productivity is very important. And here is where I think communication became key. Whereas before, when you have sort of open plan offices, you could walk into anyone's office and speak to them. In reality, from work from home, as has been mentioned before, there is a huge amount of trust that the employee certainly is focusing on their deliverables and also attempting to do the work that's been assigned in the time frame that's been given. So with that, the communication had to go up tremendously. I think the second thing we also realized is that we have to allow flexibility, because the COVID pandemic is not just about hybrid situations, it's about real situations where families do get unwell, where employees do get sick, and you have to account for all these factors when you are trying to lead. And I think their compassion and empathy certainly go a long way, and I think that's something that's going to be here to stay. I think one of the broad things from our business that we have seen is that the whole landscape of investing has changed. We are investors in infrastructure projects, and we look to provide financing support for infrastructure projects. And what we've noticed in Pakistan is that the entire definition of what constitutes infrastructure has changed. Whereas roads and bridges are still perhaps very important to Pakistan, the digital infrastructure landscape has become even more so. And there we lag behind significantly in terms of our region with regards to the actual fiber and the actual mobile telecom penetration and the reach that there needs to be in Pakistan, both on a fiber to home as well as on a telecom side. So we have seen many more opportunities come to us in the digital space, in the early stage investing in platforms that previously were not considered infrastructure, but because they offer a marketplace, are now actually considered building blocks of that infrastructure environment that needs to be created in Pakistan. And I think you can see that in the broader environment. When you look at the Pakistan Stock Exchange, you look at the PSX index, over a 5-year basis, we probably haven't moved much on an index basis. But you can certainly pick up enough stories within that, or look at individual stocks within that have focused on either technology or on services that were value additive during COVID, and those stock prices have certainly moved tremendously. So you are seeing that investment paradigm shift entirely in the Pakistan space as well, and that's something that we will have to contend with as we go forward. I think the last point I'll just make here before I hand over is that the entire idea of how to evaluate a company has also changed. It used to be fairly straightforward. You had a standard revenue top line, you had a certain cost structure, and then you had a bottom line. And from that, you would say, okay, this company is worth X on a shareholder value basis. But I think now, given the kind of changes that COVID has brought, you now have to say, okay, well, how does this company contribute to the community? What are the ESG standards that this company is aspiring to? What are the gender standards that it's looking to do? What are the internal policies as far as the human element of employee management is concerned? So now it's not just about the hard numbers. There's a lot of soft impact that we're trying to see companies create. And more, even within the Pakistan landscape, where these discussions were not had even 2-3 years ago, now they're a regular part of that investing conversation. So I think these are the thoughts that we will take forward in the next 2 or 3 years and hopefully bring about a good positive change on that front as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Maheen. Khalid, next to you, you've, mashallah, developed one of the best-known brands in Pakistan. So over your journey, what sort of leadership traits have you found to be the most effective? And more importantly, do you think they're changing or they need to change moving ahead into the 21st century?
Yeah, you referred to me, my own experience, and I think that I have a company which is now an old company, and my customers know the company better than I know myself. So if I was to be allowed, I'll share some thoughts on leadership a little bit from a different angle. And I will attempt to compress, instead of talking about myself, and then later on maybe we can use it as an illustration. I'll try to compress in the next 5 to 7 minutes only about 2,500 years of learning on leadership. And let's see what are the key learnings we can compress and then apply them to the modern day, today contemporary Pakistan. So 2,500 years ago in China, a book was written called The Art of War by Sun Tzu. And Sun Tzu wrote this treatise, which is used, which has been really a kind of a Bible for later day philosophers. But about the same time, there lived in China another philosopher called Confucius. And Confucius and Sun were both contemporaries. And so Confucius tried to expound most of the thinkings that had been put in The Art of War, the book that he famously wrote. And he wrote it as 450 essays, which are known as the Artifacts of Confucius. So that was 2,500 years ago. The key learning about leadership in those, from all those that have been distilled, is that the leadership has to comprise of 3 key components. And that is, number 1, you have to have the will. It's very important that any leadership that you take upon, you want to do and accomplish something. Will, then you have to have the knowledge, and will and knowledge, and then you have to have the capability, the power and the capability to do it, the skills of doing that job. Now, let me come back now to the modern times. In recent times, a very scholarly work has been written in the past few years by somebody who in the Western world is now one of the contemporary great thinkers of our time. And he's written 3 amazing books. One is The History of Humankind, The Sapiens, and then he wrote Homo Deus, which is the word of the future. And then he wrote 21 lessons for the 21st century. Now, the key that he has distilled, and in between 2,500 years and now have really been the 3 major religions of the world which have shaped modern day thinking and a lot of our society and jurisprudence today. This man, a few years ago, put 2 very important, interesting theses. First, he said that we human beings have a capacity to sometimes overlook some some things that are very, very evident, very much there. And we don't see that. And the example he said is that one of the greatest developments in recent times, and by recent times I mean 400 years ago, was the development of the Industrial Revolution that came. Industrial Revolution, at the heart of it was the fact that they harnessed the power of steam. And the steam engine led to industrialization, and that led to the modern day economies and all the global power structure in the society as it exists today. But he says that the heart of it, the steam, the power of steam, was something that human beings were seeing for thousands of years. That if you boil water, you see, there's a power, there's the lid or moves. For thousands of years, it didn't occur to them at that time that there was something in it, until it occurred to somebody who used that principle. Okay? And then he says there's another very important thing, that sometimes you have a blind spot. There's some things that are very, very obvious, but we do not see that. And human beings have that blind spot. And in that blind spot, I will give you an example that, let me come to modern day Pakistan, let us go back just a week ago. And I'll quote a few examples from our contemporary life. And I say it, first of all, since it delves a little bit into the political sphere, but it is not in any way meant in any, it's with all in due respect to the politicians. I think it's a reflection of the society as a whole. Politicians are just part of us. Now, we passed, a few days ago, we passed what is called a mini budget. And mini budget became very necessary to meet the government cash flows. And the cash flows, we realized, whatever came out of into the papers, that the government of this fifth largest population center of the world was gasping for $1 billion tranche from the IMF. And for that, they had to go through all those processes of legislative changes and everything. Now, we're gasping for a few $1 billion, say, from IMF. But don't we see that, little do we realize, and for everyone to see, and everybody knows it's a common feature, that just below the surface, in our very country, just the recordic deposits in the recordic mines. And a friend of mine told me, because he served for a while as a minister of natural resources, and he said that is an information I got at that date, that the deposits of the recordic mines is worth trillions of dollars over a period of time. And yet, the wealth that is lying there, and we do not need anybody else to do that, it is something that we humans have a capacity somehow of overlooking. Okay? And then he mentions another, this thing, that one of the very powerful elements in society is the factor of human stupidity. It is one of the most powerful forces in the world today, that human beings, wherever we have made all this progress, we are also in some ways very stupid. And there are many examples that we can take, that there are of things that we could have done, but we could not do. Not because, for example, there is that we just heard in a previous panel that Pakistan is under the threat of being one of the most water-deprived countries of the world. Now, we could have built a dam or dams or whatever the solution was in the last 70 years. Had we done that, we would not only have had a water problem addressed, we would have had agricultural productivity, we would have had the benefit of hydel power, which is the cheapest source of electric power, and water management and flood control. We did not do it, and the reason was because we did not have the will to do it. So one of the important ingredients of leadership is you must have a will to do what you want to do, and you must have a great desire and the ability to able to do it. You cannot, a leader of an industrial enterprise cannot say that he doesn't have the right people, or he doesn't, or the workforce is not there. Because what leadership, it is, if the workforce It's the people that you've got to get the job out of them. That is therefore the demand on the leadership to get the work done. And you can't say, like a bad workman blames his tools, that the people are not there. We have to adapt the leadership skills, therefore, to adopt to those kind of challenges. On that, I hope I've left some thought-provoking ideas, and if there are any questions and answers, thank you.
Thank you, Khalid. Thank you so much. Ghazanfar, again, to another service-based industry, how do you see leadership evolving in your space, and which is so important for Pakistan?
I hope it works. Yeah. Thank you, Farrukh. As Khalid Saab alluded to the concept of leadership, I mean, in his scholarly way, I would like to be simple and mundane in terms of how I view the leadership challenge. This country, mashallah, 5th largest country in the world in terms of population, huge resources, and we have all kinds of problems facing us as going to IMF, as Khalid Saab alluded, and macroeconomy challenges. We have many challenges, but I think 3 of them are key challenges that we face as a country. One is education. And until and unless a nation is educated, there will be more problems, I mean, in future if we don't really address this issue, because an educated, talented workforce is need of the hour. If we educate them, they become an asset, and if we don't, they will become not just a liability, but actually a factor of instability in future. The second is healthcare. It's closely associated with, again, education. If education is not there, the provision of healthcare will also be a challenge. So that's about quality of human resources. The third one is the part that I actually am part of a profession that has the responsibility to address it, which is access to finance. That education, healthcare, and finance are the 3 ingredients of development, in my view, that needs to be addressed properly. And unfortunately, our coverage of these 3 elements is extremely low compared to the region and the world. In COVID times, and particularly since we already had heard these issues, the challenges actually increased. And what we tried to do was that we are trying to perfect a business model which relies on technology and addresses the question of access to finance in a more effective and expeditious manner than actually the traditional models have worked so far. To be more precise, the formal banking systems in Pakistan so far have only reached to about 30% of savers and less than 10% of borrowers. So the institution that I represent, we have a challenge, had the challenge of increasing this access to finance in terms of savings from 30% to, say, at least 50%, and also provide access to finance to those segments of society which are denied access by traditional institutions. So I'm very glad to say that these, despite challenges posed by the COVID, we reached out to about 37 million customers in these challenging times. And I'm sure many of the people sitting here in this audience also might be using Jazz Cash, which is now a well-known and household application, which is used for basic...
If I could interrupt just to ask you, I was talking to SN Sai of Daraz a little while back, and he said that, and yours is also a technology-focused business, that, for example, Daraz, even though it's now a reasonably mature business, they still have to operate with the mindset of a startup, right? So these targets or the work that you need to do in terms of financial inclusion, etc., how do you motivate your people to go and do it? What sort of leadership does that require to push them for such ambitious targets? Can you share a little bit about how you are molding the culture and leadership, within your business?
Yeah, the question for myself and for our teams is very simple, that all of us say that we have huge problems that we need to tackle with. So what we can do in our space, so we are in financial services space, so what is it that we can do to actually address it to at least a fairly large extent? So that is a question that if we are making an impact, that means that we are making a contribution. So the whole idea is that at least in the space that we operate, we reach out to the maximum number of people who have never ever been part of the financial system. And as I said, I'm very glad that we have, as of today, 37 million people part of our system, and they have a mobile account. And they use mobile account for all basic financial services, which includes transfer of funds, receiving wages, paying utility bills, and children's fees, etc., etc. We also have now, we started a pilot this year, actually, during this COVID phenomena, of digitally lending to those who want to avail digital financial services. Sure. So during the pilot phase, we have hit 2 million customers who actually borrow from up to rupees 10,000, and from rupees 50 to 10,000. And they repay in a week's time or a couple of weeks' time, and maximum credit is for a month or so, and they keep revolving. And many of these people are small, very small businesses.
Sure.
And so our view is that if we can do 2 million in a pilot phase, then the scalability of the model is obvious. And then we can reach out to the maximum people, who use mobile phone or something. Okay. And the next phase is actually a credit for merchants, which is again going to be digital.
Great. Thank you so much. Maheen, just on that same way, coming back to you, made the point about that many of the businesses that you're seeing to invest in are new kind of infrastructure businesses, marketplaces. So, and also diversity, ESG is becoming an increasingly important part of investment analysis. So in terms of, again, I'd like us to focus on, the leadership aspects of these changes. So when you're looking at a business, a traditional infrastructure business versus a new economy, marketplace kind of business, what are the different kinds of leaders that you look for that may be successful in these two different...
That's a really interesting question. So our starting point, or the starting point when we're talking about looking at things from an impact focus, is, well, we understand your business, but what is the change that you're hoping to bring through the finance that you're looking to raise? And if that's simply just something that goes to contribute more and more to your bottom line, then that's great for you. But really, are you making a change in the community that you're operating in? And that is the question that we like to see addressed very early on. And if we can filter through those kind of businesses that are seeking to do much more than just profit, but instead are looking to do profit with a purpose, then automatically for us, the profit with a purpose, that is a concept that comes straight from the top. It's not a concept that comes through from the rank and file of a company. It is CEO driven and it is board driven. And I think that's the starting point before we even get into the numbers itself. So, this is not something that Pakistan can afford to shy away from, because I think the question also is, what happens if we don't think about this way of investing? We are operating in a world where, for us, our challenges are real. We need to increase our exports substantially in order to avoid the kind of IMF issues and the current account issues that we continue to face. Now, the rest of the world is not just looking at you as an exporter, it's looking at you as an exporter who has to operate under a model of sustainability. And that's something that every market now, particularly the ones that we are dependent on, such as the US and Europe, are asking for as a minimum hygiene factor. So if we cannot tailor our businesses to begin thinking about this today and begin implementing
before
these
the businesses, we need the leaders who will think like that.
Exactly. But
so how do we create those leaders? I want to get back to leadership.
I think the market will drive it automatically. If an exporter goes to an external market and they turn around and they say, well, you don't have an ESG program, automatically you're not getting the order. So then the leader needs to go back and the CEO needs to go back and have a think, as in, will he continue in that line of business? And if so, it will be a very narrow market focus. Or can he actually grow by implementing sustainability factors into his business model automatically? So that's something that's already being demanded of companies in the world. I think where the bigger challenge will be is those that don't cater to the rest of the world and those that just cater to the Pakistan market. And there too, I think the questions still stand. We are in a situation where our supply chain pressures are going to automatically increase the cost of doing business over the next 3 to 5 years. That's a given. Because the way the supply chain issues are going globally, it's a global-led phenomenon on inflation, and it's going to hit Pakistan as well. So we can continue to operate on expensive fossil fuels, such as oil, which will go north of, say, $80, $85, $90. Or we can begin to look at alternative fuel sources, such as renewable energy, in a much more sustainable way. And so I think the market will eventually take us to the point where if you are a CEO sitting in a local company and you're not interested in the environment or climate or sustainability or worker rights, you will find yourself at an automatic disadvantage from the very basis of your cost structure and the kind of markets that you can sell to. So I think the conversation cannot really be ignored anymore.
No, I agree. And even as Dr. Shamshad touched upon in the opening remarks, even from capital markets or banks financing perspective, companies that are not starting to focus on ESG and diversity issues, the cost of capital will keep going up. But, to productivity, Javed, I'd just like to ask you, and I was at a discussion group recently where a senior government rep very frankly and honestly said that, look, you know what the power costs are. In your industry, you know what the price increases are going to be. Everything else is known. How do you make yourself productive? One of the headings of our panel is productivity as well. So we operate in Pakistan. We know what the infrastructure shortcomings are. We know our cost of power isn't going down. If anything, it's going to stay regionally uncompetitive. So as a leader in an industrial company, how do you create that productivity that still allows you to be profitable and in fact be regionally competitive? You've also made acquisitions overseas. How do you increase productivity in Pakistan?
I think you're very right. First of all, as I said earlier, pharmaceutical is a regulated market. So unlike the other markets or consumer goods where you're allowed to increase the price depending on the inflation, depending on your cost of production, we are completely regulated by Drug Regulatory Authority of Pakistan, where we are not allowed to increase the price. Now there is a policy where once a year, to the certain extent you can increase the price, a percentage of the inflation. But overall, supply chain issues, as Maheen is saying, is really critical for us. The utility cost is going up. The overall cost of manufacturing production is going up. So it's a big challenge. And the Pakistan environment, if you see, is a total market size of $3 billion pharmaceutical market size. And there are more than 650 pharmaceutical companies operating in Pakistan. So it's highly fragmented, highly competitive market. I have worked in other markets of the world, particularly the regional market. If I see Philippines or if I see Vietnam, the total market size is $5 billion, 100 million population, and hardly you will find 150 companies maximum. To Pakistan is like $3 billion and then 650 companies fighting for the market share in this competitive environment. So it's even if your draft will allow to go for the price increase, but your competitors will not allow to do it.
The challenges are known. So how are you within Martin Dow working to increase the productivity to be able to be successful in this challenging environment?
There are two ways of doing it. One is that definitely you need to adopt the technology so that you can be more efficient and more productive. And then and another way of doing it is that you diversify. Because instead of focusing on one market, which is Pakistan market, highly competitive, the world market is $1.25 trillion. And if you look at the regional market like Middle East, North Africa, and ASEAN, so what we can do is that instead of putting all the resources in one market, where it is highly competitive and that is highly regulated, we should expand and go to other markets of the world, which is a big potential for the pharmaceutical Pakistan industry. So this is one way, is that you can diversify. Second is, in pharmaceutical and health sector, one is the prescription-driven market. Then there is Ali was talking in the morning about the well-being, because everything is changing because of COVID. Everybody is so sensitive about their health that immune system is very critical. Vitamins are now very critical. People are changing their lifestyle. So getting into the nutraceutical and health supplement market is another good strategy to get in. It's not that competitive, prices are not controlled, and the trend is changing. So one way is to change your business model. Another way is to bring technology to improve the overall cost, overall processes, overall systems. And then you should have a good tie-ups with your service providers, for your vendors and suppliers. Because when we buy the raw material, that we are not here for a month or a year, we are here for long term. So if we can have a strategic tie-up with those companies, and we should look beyond a simple supply and a customer relationship. We should get into joint venture with those companies and to secure the supplies at a much competitive prices. And we have to think out of the box, different models for this.
Thank you. Question back to you, Markus. One sort of, very, very quickly, just share the leadership circle, the mechanics of it. I mean, how often do you meet? Does it last for years, or is it just a one-off meeting? Just, I think, because it's an interesting thing for people to understand. But after that, something we touched upon yesterday, all of us have grown up with the mantra of being customer-focused, customer-centric. And how are you at Siemens staying safe, working from home, but still, keeping the customer first?
Thank you. Difficult question, but
thanks.
I hope it's fine. Fine. Thank you for the question. Again, I tried since decades to change my style, to improve myself, but I think what we all need to breathe in is the multiplier effect. Let's say I perfect myself, but how many other people do I reach, right? And having this concept of circles and creating this in parallel. By the way, we are meeting monthly, and that's the whole year, and probably it continues next year as well. So we have this monthly meeting of the group, and then we scramble the group again, and we continue, and they are engaged every month. And we have exercises to conduct in between. But this is the multiplier effect to the learning, right? And sharing my experience, listening to others, what was their experience in various situations, of the business or personal life, or superior subordinate situations, they can gain so much because they trust me. I'm in the same company. I trust them also. They're also in the same company, right? So I have not seen this concept over decades, not in decades. It is above and beyond if I improve myself and perfect myself, because at the same time, this accelerates the learning of all the others. Then what are the main themes in the leadership circle? You touched it already. This is customer focus. How can we think like our customers? What is ultimately helping our customers? How can we predict in what direction they might want to go and then cater the solution for that? So that's one pillar. Or then also our technology need to have a purpose. How does our technology help the society to become better or cleaner or more sustainable? It's a thing we are breathing and thinking about. Then how to empower our people is the third pillar, because if everything comes back to me or my CFO for a decision, we are all but only slow. So by de-escalating the need for approval, by creating an environment of trust and empowering the employees, we increase speed, we increase confidence, and growth. So the constant thinking on what else could I shed off that simply lands on my table out of historic reasons, or of course I'll never forget the governance, but there is an arm's length which you can adjust, yeah. And empowering people is a very, very important element as well, a third pillar. And the fourth pillar is our growth mindset. How can we accelerate our growth? And every one of us has a growth mindset dashboard. I could tip on the laptop or iPad and know how many trainings hours I had this year. Even if I would go to an external seminar, I can get an accreditation for that in the company training hour. And this is part of our quality objective and targets for the company, very measurable. You can show it to every auditor. It does something good for the people. They are learning. And we are increasing the benchmark every year. So we need to have relearning, and we can't rest on what we studied or learned 20, 30 years ago. And that is also a new thing. We challenge everyone in the company, and every leader, every manager, every general manager and director has his benchmark for accelerated learning. And the dashboard of the trainings, he either has to mandatory fulfill or simply to do his hours. Yeah, that's the fourth one. Thank you very much, and
great, thank you. I think Siddharth, should we open up for questions for if we have a few minutes, so we don't have time?
You can take another question, but
we're not opening the floor. Okay, I think to conclude, we just have a few minutes, and maybe this can be the concluding question which everyone can think about and answer. You know, life for managers and for CEOs used to be quite simple because you focused on shareholder return, and that's all you were really measured for. And now we have stakeholders, and you have to manage ESG stakeholders. How do leaders need to adapt, and how are you yourselves, dealing with that? Do you want to start from that end, and we can just come back? Can I try? Ghazanfar.
I think everybody has said that in one way or the other. I was fortunate to work with Khalid sir for some time, as Sidra did at TCS. I don't think if we just keep saying that we made this much money this year, and we have made more money actually this year than the last year, or we will make more money next year than we did this year, then employees will get motivated. That's not the case. I saw at TCS that people were very proud of the fact that they made a difference in logistics space and then delivery space, where there was no competitor. Nobody was doing as good a job as people in TCS were doing. Likewise, if I tell my people that, look, our revenues will increase by this much this year, so nobody is that excited, even though money matters to everyone. But purpose, I think, is very, very important. That people, in addition to earning money, also want to be serving some positive purpose.
No, but sorry, my question, which I think is important, which for everyone, is that as leaders, as CEOs, it used to be very simple, and it's still hugely controversial. I mean, the American Business Roundtable has said that we are now responsible to stakeholders and not shareholders. Yeah. But there's a huge amount of controversy. In fact, shareholders, institutional shareholders, have come back and said, no, your job is to give the best return to your shareholders. Yeah. And then, we will look after society. It's not your job to look after society. But at the same time, there are other arguments where, no, as corporate leaders, our role is to look after stakeholders, which includes society at large. So how are you in your business? And I'd love everyone to just share their personal experience. How are you managing this tension between shareholder return versus, and we'll all have a go at it one by one. So
the first and foremost is, obviously, if we don't really focus on customers, and we do a good job at that. So first and foremost is we serve our customers better than anybody else. And then, of course, there are other shareholders. That shareholders obviously won't be investing if they don't get a fair return. And employees will not be motivated if only other people are served and employees' interests are not looked at. So I think we have to create a balance. Leaders need to create a balance between what is expected of employees, why they should be doing a exceedingly good effort at whatever the objectives are, and then finally what is in it for them. I mean, why they should, but purpose has to be very well defined.
Okay. Javed, and I think we just have one minute or 1.5 minutes each.
So when we talk about the stakeholders here, because not only the shareholders, we are talking about our employees, about our customers, and at the same time we are talking about the society and the regulators as well. So I think what I personally believe and firmly believe in practice in Martindale is that if you keep a balance and then you satisfy your customers and you contribute to the society, if you empower and train your people at the same time, the shareholder return will come in any case. It will get better, it will not get worse.
Okay, good. Khalid?
I think the greatest value of an enterprise is really lies off its balance sheet. It is not really the return, but it is the contribution that it makes to the society as a whole, starting from its customers, its employees, and everybody that it interacts with. And that is at the heart of what you call the social enterprise. And the value of it is far greater as a platform for the greater good and development of people and the general overall efficiency of the society as a whole.
Thank you. Maheen?
I think as leaders, we're going to have to start listening a lot more. I think authoritarian types of leadership are pretty much on the way out. As leaders, we have to learn to listen to our customers, our employees, our shareholders, our regulators, and find ways and mechanisms to balance and align all the interests. Because without any one of those stakeholders, the company does not have a role to play or to function in. So we must learn to listen and learn from that listening in terms of what we need to put into action.
Thank you, Markus.
Yeah, I agree. As leaders, we have to listen, but also we have to share. And I'm a great promoter of sharing. How did we make it? How did we get through certain situations? And in this sense, I also want to share with everyone who is interested, contact me after the conference through the organizers. Siemens has this degree framework where ESG is a part of it. If that is a struggle for anyone, for any company to implement, just copy with pride, listen to what we have done, how we have done it. Even in Siemens Pakistan, we introduced our ESG radar in September 2021. We are running it for every project that we are offering, and the framework is about decarbonization, ethics, governance, resource efficiency, but also equity and employability. So if that is of interest, I'm willing to share and give you information. Maybe it's easy, adjustable, adaptable, and implementable in your own company. Yeah, I think we leaders, we have to share more often. And with this, I also thank you. Farrukh Khan, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Markus. Thank you, everyone. And thank you. I hope you found something of take-home value out of this session. I certainly learned from each one of the panelists here. So thank you so much. And thank you to the Nutshell team for inviting us here. Thank you.
Thank you, Farrukh Saab. A big round of applause for our concluding panel, ladies and gentlemen. And may I request you all to please stay with us before we conclude. And Farrukh Saab, if I may just have a go at your last question, only because it was so interesting. When we talk about a plethora and this wide myriad of stakeholders being present, I think I go back to my father's advice. When I was starting media, he would say everyone will have an opinion, but then you will, for every issue, you will need to have that close-knit circle that you can perhaps listen to. Yes, the business at large needs to have a big purposeful impact in mind, but perhaps for each issue, you need to have the real voice of reason, the ones that you could closely listen to as stakeholders, because otherwise you'll probably have a lot of data, a lot of noise coming your ways, and it would be difficult to navigate your view through. Just my take on that. But ladies and gentlemen, what a brilliant, brilliant panel. We had so much room and so much thought to sort of chew upon. I loved how Markus emphasized on having a growth mindset and a growth perspective to things. Loved how Maheen emphasized on the profit with a purpose. Just a slight note of disagreement. You mentioned that, you know, we are going to adapt to things and the market forces are going to push us into doing that. That sort of takes us into the realm of being reactive rather than responding or being proactive. And market forces at large have never been that effective. So maybe we need to be a little more proactive in things. Ladies and gentlemen, what a fantastic panel. And I know that you guys are now up with the first day, which was a day of learning, unlearning and relearning for most of us. We will have day 2 as well. But to formally conclude, once again, may I take this opportunity of inviting Dr. Anam Akai from the Martin Dow Group and Air Chief Marshal Sohail Aman Sahab from the Nutshell Group to please join us up on stage. Ladies and gentlemen, big round of applause. And for this round, may I invite Rabia Ahmed, the Director and Chief Operating Officer, Nutshell Group, to please do the honors and give away these books. What a brilliant note it is when we name the book. The book that we are handing out today is Echoes from the Past, while we are looking forward to the future. First up, may I request Rabia to present a book to Markus Erich, MD and CEO of Siemens Pakistan. Next up, ladies and gentlemen, Maheen Rahman, CEO, InfraZamin, Pakistan. Our co-hosts and biggest supporters, ladies and gentlemen, from the Martin Dow Group, the Group Managing Director and CEO, Mr. Javed Ghulam Mohammad. One of the most pioneering, enterprising names with years of experience behind him, ladies and gentlemen, the founder and chairman of the TCS Group of Companies, Mr. Khalid Awan. And last but definitely not the least, aiming for impact, from the Mobilink Microfinance Bank, please welcome the President and CEO, Mr. Ghazanfar Azzam, eyeing, of course, the fortune at the bottom of the pyramid. And last but definitely not the least, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our moderator for this final panel for day 1, CEO and Managing Director, Pakistan Stock Exchange, Mr. Farrukh Khan. May I request you all to please come together for a group photograph. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Fantastic panel, and thank you. With this, day 1 comes to a conclusion. Inshallah, we'll see you tomorrow for day 2 of the Future Summit 2022. This is the 5th edition, brought to you by the Martin Dow Group, the Nutshell Group, and of course sponsored by Engro Corp and a host of other sponsors. For those of us joining us online, we'll see you tomorrow at 9 a.m. on the Nutshell for a Nutshell Group as well as Martin Dow Group Facebook pages as well. Take care of yourself. We'll see you tomorrow.